This video is sponsored by UbiSoft. Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the upcoming cooperative shooter game Rainbow Six Extraction, and see how it compares from a design perspective to the previous entry to the series, Rainbow Six Siege. Now, as this is a sponsored video, I do want to clarify that this is not intended to be a final review, but rather a step-by-step breakdown of what exactly Extraction is, and how it compares both visually and in terms of its gameplay mechanics. So, while I'll still provide some of my own personal opinions throughout, I want to focus primarily on providing you with enough information on both titles so that you yourself can decide whether Rainbow Six Extraction is right for you. If you do end up liking what you see and want to give it a go, you can buy the game now using the link I provided in the description. Alternatively, if you're on Xbox, Extraction is available day one on Xbox Game Pass. For reference, both games here are being played on a PC, with the graphics settings pushed up to their highest values at a native 4K resolution. These settings will remain in play for the gameplay portions as well, though I'll be making use of Nvidia's DLSS in its quality preset to assist in achieving a higher average frame rate. Alright, so let's kick this analysis off by first covering the presentation, starting with the character models. In staying true with Rainbow Six Siege's heavy focus on its many different operators, Extraction sees the return of many fan favorites, either through high-fidelity cutscenes to help set up the backstory, or as playable operators throughout the game. Based on these captures alone, it does appear that Extraction is using the same character models that already exist in Siege, as all of the underlying facial features and aesthetic choices remain identical. However, as you can probably already tell, there's been a bit of a wardrobe update to help tie in Extraction's apocalyptic containment setting. Operators by default now sport new blue and yellow gear, as part of the new React unit that they're involved in, as opposed to the old generic gray and black outfits used before. It's no doubt still the same old Siege content being repurposed, but it does look as though these models have been given some very small improvements still, including some higher res textures for uniforms and some touched up facial geometry. Next, we have the design of the environments. Here the changes are much more apparent. In Siege, players take part in small-scale competitive skirmishes in a variety of locations around the world, often centered around a single interconnected interior space, with many different access points to drive its attack-defend gameplay design. These levels are typically 2 to 3 stories, and feature lots of narrow corridors linking larger rooms intended to house various objectives. Extraction, on the other hand, is not a competitive shooter, and thus its levels are much larger and somewhat linear in their design. Instead of one large building that players need to breach, each of Extraction's 12 missions are split up into 3 distinctive zones, separated by one-way quarantine doors that serve as safe rooms throughout each mission. On top of this, the levels will change each time you play, with different lighting conditions, start areas, and a chance for mutations that can directly impact the gameplay. The style of these environments appears mostly consistent with the types of industrial buildings you're likely used to in the Siege universe, with things like research facilities, offices, exhibition halls, and residential spaces, all fully decorated with plenty of destructible cover and location-appropriate props. But these locations also play host to a new chimera parasite, an extraterrestrial organism that has transformed these seemingly normal locations into a nightmarish hellscape. Large organic material is wrapped around buildings, producing otherworldly structures, and a sticky black film called sprawl will steadily consume each surface, eventually coating the floors and slowing down player movement speed until they clear a path. It's certainly an interesting aesthetic choice for the game, especially considering the series' more grounded roots. But from a purely visual standpoint, it does at least commit to the concept and portrays its apocalyptic setting confidently. Assisting in this artistic goal is Extraction's lighting design, that helps to portray a proper moody feel. Thick blue and red volumetric light will regularly glow in larger chasm-like spaces. It reminds me a lot of the seasonal events in Rainbow Six Siege, especially the Halloween-based events. But other than the aesthetic choice, the actual lighting techniques being utilized in Extraction aren't noticeably different from those used in Siege already. The lighting and shadowing remain static, with techniques like global illumination being utilized to help account for the dynamic nature of the engine's destruction effects. And screen space reflections and local cube maps are incorporated for things like puddles outside on the street, or shiny walls like those found in the Café Dostoevsky level. It's certainly not revolutionary, but I do appreciate the smaller details thrown in here, like the black light effect from each operator's UV flashlight, that causes certain objects to glow, and can even be used to reveal enemies through walls for an easy silent kill. Extraction's new effects are also interesting. All of the same destruction fans loved about Siege returns exactly the same as before, with walls that can be shot or blown open to create new entrances, and lots of destructible props littered throughout every location. But one of my favorite new effects here is the sprawl, that will radiate out from these alien nests and cover every connected surface. To slow its spread, players can shoot into the sprawl or shine a special flashlight onto it, causing large gaps to appear relative to the impact point. But it does eventually become too difficult to control, especially when players are stuck dealing with increasingly more aggressive enemies in the late stages. Now, let's turn our attention away from the technical side of things and talk about the gameplay design instead. If you haven't already noticed, Siege and Extraction play almost nothing alike. Siege is, of course, a 5v5 attack-defend competitive shooter game, where a team of attackers needs to infiltrate a heavily fortified building and accomplish a specified objective, while a team of defenders attempts to hold them back. In keeping true with the series' tactical shooter roots, Siege features no respawn, and a very low time to kill, making firefights extremely fast and deadly, and forcing players to rely on teamwork to help stay alive. Adding on to this is Siege's operator system, where players can select from one of several specific operators, each with their own stats, weapons, and signature gadget, often balanced out by one or two other operators on the opposing team. Extraction, on the other hand, is not a competitive shooter at all. It's instead a 3-player cooperative experience, where players face off against an assortment of AI-controlled alien creatures throughout several unique locations, each linked together with randomized objectives and gameplay mutations. With all this in mind, players are greatly encouraged to sneak their way to their objective, with new stealth indicators now being displayed to indicate when an enemy has been disturbed or alerted. If a player can take down the enemy with a melee kill or hit their weak spot before they have a chance to call for help, then they'll earn bonus points for a tactical kill and will prevent the dormant eggs from spreading the sprawl or spawning in additional enemies. The enemies are split up into 4 tiers, with higher tiers being more deadly and challenging to contend with. Tier 1 enemies include your typical melee-focused grunts, a ranged soldier called the Spiker, and 2 explosive-carrying enemies that can make short work of any walls or doors. Tier 2 and 3 enemies get to be a bit trickier, with more difficult-to-target weak spots along their body, and more varied attacks to help keep players on edge. These are all capped off by Tier 4 enemies that serve as occasional boss battles, requiring players to make use of anything in their arsenal to get out alive. But eliminating the enemy is only part of the experience in both of these games. In Siege, the primary goal is often to secure a specific room, or defuse a deadly explosive. In Extraction, on the other hand, there's at least 12 different objectives that can be offered, 3 for each match played. Each of the 3 objectives per mission are randomly selected upon deployment, ensuring that no 2 experiences ever feel the same, while also forcing players to adjust their tactics to complete their mission in the most efficient way possible. Objectives include planting beacons on dormant alien nests, luring a target to an extraction zone for study, rescuing a VIP or downed friendly operator, and destroying key targets like elite Archaeans or parasitic towers. The goal for each session is to complete up to 3 objectives, and then successfully extract from the area in order to bank the player's earned points. Doing so will net the player a sizable amount of bonus XP, and will also unlock more weapons and gear for the operator that they decide to use. To help tie the game's drastically different gameplay direction in with the series' core attributes, Extraction ensures that each player is given a finite amount of health and ammo, challenging players to either risk pressing forward to earn more points, or cut their losses and extract from an available extraction point early. If a player does fall in combat, there's no respawns, and that player will remain knocked out for the remainder of the match. What's more, the operator that the fallen player was using will also be removed from the player's menu selection in the immediate follow-up mission, unless their teammates can successfully retrieve their body and carry it back to an extraction zone. If the team fails to retrieve a fallen teammate, this operator can be rescued from a stand-in rescue objective in a follow-up deployment. But it'll take some time between rounds before this operator can be healed and restored to a playable state. Speaking of operators, Extraction also sees some minor tweaks to how each of these returning operators handle. For one, operators are given access to primary and secondary weapons that aren't assigned to them normally in Siege. Additionally, each of these operators' special abilities have been tweaked to be more practical against the Archaeans, making things like Pulse's heartbeat sensor pick up the location of nests from far away, or Tachanka's old mounted turret that now can rotate a full 360 degrees. Practically every operator included in Extraction has seen some sort of tweak along these lines, taking their core ability and adjusting it so that it functions within the confines of the new PvE design. And these changes are further paired with a selection of new gadgets called React Tech. React Tech are secondary gadgets like grenades and mines that could be replenished in bulk throughout the course of each incursion. These include returning devices like smoke grenades, claymores, fragmentation grenades, and impacts, but also include brand new futuristic items like energy shields, scan mines, glue grenades, and a flashlight to help clean up the sprawl. All of these things, from the operators to their weapons and gadgets, can be unlocked by earning XP, which can also be earned in bulk by upping the difficulty and the potential risk. Collectively, it's a more engaging format than I anticipated. What starts out relatively slow and simple can very quickly escalate to be incredibly tense, with a lone surviving player on a team having to make critical decisions about when and where to extract, based on the type of threat and objective being presented. And with random parasite mutations like enemies that rapidly spread the sprawl or aliens that can turn invisible, the game gets more and more interesting the longer you play. Overall, Rainbow Six Extraction is a highly experimental take on the Rainbow Six formula. Rather than dropping players into grounded, tactical, counter-terror operations, Extraction illustrates a sort of what-if scenario, where the fan-favorite Siege operators are faced with an extreme threat well beyond their typical capabilities. It's a bizarre game, but one that die-hard fans of Siege and its operators will no doubt enjoy playing through. And while it's certainly not going to displace the large number of players currently enjoying Siege's PvP offerings, it does at least offer something a little bit different, and has enough systems in place to keep the gameplay engaging. But what do you guys think? Are you interested in giving Rainbow Six Extraction a try? Or are you going to stick with Siege instead? Let me know in the comments section. I'd also like to thank UbiSoft for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to give Extraction a shot, you can buy the game now on participating platforms for $39.99. Alternatively, if you're on Xbox, Extraction is available day one on Xbox Game Pass. You can find more information in the links I provided in the description. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.